Good afternoon, everyone. James here. Marta sat next to me as always.
Hello.
Good to see you. It is actually the 7th of 7 AQA A-Level PE sessions. If you're here live with us, thank you very much. You are saintly because, of course, you've got paper 1 to get through first. You got to think about your sports psychology. You've got to think about your biomechanics, exercise physiology. And actually, this sports society and technology stuff might be like the last hurdle, but we're going to provide it nice so people have got access to it and can address their questions around this as they make progress. We're going to look at some really kind of detailed stuff in this session. We're going to do all of that fun and joy of sports legislation and of the impact of commercialisation. We're going to have a look at key terminology around ethics in sports. All of that is to come. I bet you can't wait. What are you laughing at? I'm being serious. But what I would like to say to you folks is obviously what we've put together here is 7 sessions you should have with you. For each of those sessions, including today, you should have your notes pages alongside you. You should have your practice questions, which we do hope you've had a go at. You should have also your model answers and mark schemes. They're all for you to use. And later on, I'm going to actually show you where we extract this information from, either in the break or towards the end of the session. So when things appear on the canvas for me, on one of the images that Martha's made, where does that language come from? How do we know that that's accurate? I'm going to show you that a bit later on as a bit of a detail, just so you know. With regard to the chat today, Martha is here waiting for your comments.
I am waiting.
On the hub page. You can go to the little chat icon and you can talk to us directly, and we really do appreciate receiving those comments, and we try to answer all of them. So do try and bring those to us, and we'll answer your question. Even if you just want to say hello, feel free to do exactly that. Can I just remind teachers out there, your students are perfectly entitled to be accessing our platform. If you're not a subscriber to us, you can use the platform for free for a 28-day free trial before these guys do their exams. It will cover them for the whole of the exam period. just get involved. It's there for you. Why wouldn't you do that? It's an unbelievable level of assistance, and the students can really tailor their preparation for that which they need. Marta, I have the impression I've forgotten something, but I don't know what it is. Oh, of course, it's please subscribe and like. Now, normally I'm saying, come on, get us to 8,000 subscribers, and we passed that particular milestone earlier today. So my request to you is please hit subscribe so we can get to 1 million. Oh, hang on a minute. So we can get to 8,050. That would be really nice. We really do appreciate these subscribers, and perhaps more importantly than anything, hit that like button. It just gives us that little promote in the algorithm for the search and all that kind of stuff. So it's kind of useful that you folks do that. So thank you very much, and we can keep stuff free. So there you go. Marta, anything you'd like to these fine young cannibals came to our mind then? Just remember them. Yeah. What did they sing? We'll think about that.
I do know what
we'll think about that.
Yeah.
If I have a good band in the 80s.
They're
way too young.
Yeah.
Anyway, anything before we get started on key terms in ethics in sport?
No, let's go for it.
Okay, so here we go. We're going to start off with amateurism and bits and bobs. Let's crack into it. Okay, let's clarify some key terms specifically related to ethics in sport, and I guess in physical activity more generally. Let's have a look. We've got this concept of amateurism, and I'm pretty sure that you can tell me that it's not for financial gains. That's fairly obvious, right? We know that. But on the other side of that particular coin is the idea that we're doing sport for the love of it. Sometimes we say in the image of God. I might even have that on. Here we go. It's sort of from God-given talents, and sport in the image of God. Now, you may or may not be religious of various denominations, but certainly in the 19th century, where the notion of sport that we understand it today developed, godliness was very, very closely related to that developed version of kind of rational recreation and participating for the good of one's health, but also to represent kind of God-given talent. So I just wanted to represent that sort of notion to you. Therefore, of course, is developed in the Victorian era, particularly the upper classes. When I say the upper classes, we're particularly talking about the upper and the middle, both of those. And the middle class were particularly important, of course, as we've seen elsewhere in the 19th century, because they developed this kind of rationalised, codified version of sport, but it was in a strict amateur code. It's historically adhered to a high set of moral values, sometimes refer to this as half athleticism, as the upper and middle class could afford to play sport. So, if you consider this, they had the choice to have kind of high values in their sporting participation because they could spend that time without kind of, having to be paid for it in essence. Participation more important than winning, that's a phrase that still exists very strongly in our society today. Amateurs in the 19th century were the elite. Now that's really interesting, isn't it? We often got amateur versus professional contests in the 19th century, amateur versus professional in the 19th century. But it's really interesting to reflect that the amateurs were the elite body of participants, of course, with exceptions. And finally, we still see a strong sort of notion of fair play, links to sportsmanship, of course. But in modern sport, we still get a notion of this. We have relatively few amateurs these days in top-level sport, elite sport in performance, but certainly traditionally this was the view. Now, let's take this a little bit further. We also want to have a look at the Olympic oath. Now, it kind of is my job here, I suppose, to an extent, to read this to you. So, get comfy, as it were. But I just sort of want to bring well, I'll tell you what, I won't read it. It's there for you to read. There's certain themes here. But there's things I want to build off of this. The first one, obviously, we've looked at this elsewhere. We've got this Baron Pierre de Coubertin. Baron, I'll just put him as de Coubertin here. He was effectively the founder of the modern Olympics, first held in 1896. It was he ultimately was the inspiration for this. But just note that this Olympic oath was not spoken until 1920. So this came actually as a post-First World War concept. And it's important to sort of stress that. Now, we can say it's a promise. This is the athlete portion. The athletes read this out, and it's a promise that they make. And if you look at it carefully, it kind of encourages the idea of no prize money. So it links back to our kind of amateur concept really, really neatly. Now, I don't want to get too political when it comes to the Olympic Games, but I am going to make one point here. The fact that athletes do not get prize money for the Olympics, I think, is absolutely reasonable. But the fact that corporations make so much money from it, from their, I think they call it partnership deals rather than sponsorship, that is highly questionable, in my opinion. We've also obviously got the idea that still today deviant behaviour is punished. So if somebody, for example, deviant behaviour punished. So if, for example, somebody does dope, that's mentioned here, They will be punished for that, have their medal stripped, that kind of thing. We look at that in other parts of our course. We also have the idea now of stringent drug testing. Now, of course, you wouldn't need stringent drug testing, or let's call it doping control. I'll put drug testing here. You wouldn't need that if people actually honoured this oath. It wouldn't be relevant, would it? You wouldn't have to have that. But we've still got things like lots of doping, but also we've even got things like state-sponsored doping still occurring. Now, of course, the big story around that is the scandal that has emerged in Russia, particularly around the Rusada lab for the Sochi Olympics, but also for other competitions as well. And if you want to go and have a look more in detail of that, I really recommend the documentary Icarus, which is on Netflix. I'll give you a really, really good insight into that. I'm not going to go into the details of it here. We still see today lots of gamesmanship, more of which in a second. So today, we might not see kind of cheating and deviancy, but you might see people behaving with gamesmanship, trying to take the maximum advantage out of the rules. Does that break the Olympic oath? Kind of an interesting question. We also see today that the Olympics has really been commercialised. Okay, and I've already sort of intimated some of my feelings about that. But we've got the Olympic Games being commercialised. How does that fit into this? And does it fit into this? We've got today also that today we have lots of professional athletes. Think about the golfers, think about the footballers. Lots of professional athletes taking part in the Olympics and supposedly adhering to this. And in the most negative sense, if we take it to the worst possible application, today we have at times a win-at-all-costs mentality. Now, I'm going to come back to this point in a second. But I think the first thing we can say about the win-at-all-cost mentality, it is not represented in this oath. This oath is really the opposite of that. But we are seeing it, we are perceiving it, not by everybody, but by enough athletes for it to be a concern. So is this Olympic oath still relevant today? Well, some of the points we've made there, I think, at least begin to justify an argument around that. Sportsmanship and gamesmanship, of course, linked to this. I want to start with sportsmanship. Playing by the rules and the unwritten rules. It's fairness. It's a high code of ethics. It's maintaining self-control and not losing the plot. I mean, you guys can think about that as like a arousal control, I suppose, from your sports psychology and what have you. Treating others fairly, etiquette, respect for opponents and officials, kicking the ball out of play for an injury is an example. Walking in cricket when out when you know you've edged it or whatever. Conforming to the rules, spirit and etiquette of sport. That's what we mean by sportsmanship. And can I just say to anyone sort of concerned that I've included not sportspersonship here, this is the accepted term. I completely see the argument for that, but I'm using the accepted terms as I record this particular session. So that's my stance on that one. Now, gamesmanship is not quite the opposite of this, but it's almost like we're taking sportsmanship and we're kind of abandoning elements of it, and we're doing that because we want to win. So what do we do here? We bend the rules for the maximum advantage without getting caught or without effectively breaking the rules. Whatever method needed to achieve the desired result, okay? We've also got, it's a very fine line with cheating. So it's almost cheating, but not quite. We fail to follow the sporting etiquette. Etiquette, which is almost like that behavioural code, accepted way. This is what we're happy to let go of that with gamesmanship in order to have more chance of winning. It might be sledging, which is of course trying to use sort of psychological tactics and saying things to an opponent in, let's say, cricket. Time wasting, delaying play. Now again, is this within the rules? When it's not within the rules, it's no longer gamesmanship. But when it's within the rules and doesn't get punished, this is a form of gamesmanship. And we've got things like deception. I'm not sure I like the word deception here. I like the word exaggeration. So football is a classic for this, isn't it? Associated football, soccer. Exaggerating a foul. You may have sort of been clipped or caught, and then you throw yourself over to really make the referee make a decision about whether you were actually fouled or not, and potentially winning a penalty or whatever it happens to be. So that exaggeration might be a form of gamesmanship. But where I want to go next with this is to talk about the concept of a win ethic, okay? And this is a really important term, one which we must understand. So the win ethic says that, and obviously add these points into your notes, second place is not an option. That is what the win ethic says. Second place is, I think I might be quoting the Karate Kid here, no place. In fact, I almost certainly am. What was that guy who was the bad coach in that first... Anyway, it doesn't matter. Let's not go down that road. I haven't watched Cobra Kai. Anyway, definitely don't go down that road, James. Bring your mind back. Okay, we're often referring to this as the Lombardian ethic. And we call it the Lombardian ethic because Vince Lombardi was the head coach of the Green Bay Packers, I believe in the 70s. And was it into the 80s? I'm going to say 70s. And he developed a system where They focus entirely on winning, marginal gains, and of course they were very successful as a result. We see a lot of this in modern day sport, where the objective, and compare this to, for example, your amateurism, modern DAP, what's a modern DAP? Modern day sport. We compare this to your amateurism, where the focus here is on winning and not participating. We just talked about the opposite way of doing that. An example of this, let me change that to a slightly lighter shade. We would have no drawn games. A draw does not exist. A draw cannot exist. We see this a lot in American sports. Draws are irrelevant. Why would you have a draw in sport? We can also have examples like managers sacked if they're not getting the results. So managers are sacked or coaches are sacked because the only thing that matters is results. We see that in lots and lots of football. It's possible that this leads to deviance, but the reason it would lead to deviance is because we have developed the win ethic into what we call a win at all costs mentality. Now, these things are different. Win at all costs is literally what it says. You will do whatever it takes to win, including breaking the law. Can I just stress that the assumption around the win ethic itself is that it's within the rules, but obviously we're talking potentially about moving into deviance here. And can I just make one last point? We also get through the media lots of praise for winners. And you'll see this in all kinds of punditry. You'll see this in all kind of commentary. You get praise for winners, not so much for the process, and certainly very negative criticism of losing. So these are what we mean by the win ethic. Now let's take this a little bit further. I'm going to do a couple of questions. Here we go. The Green Bay Packers American football coach Vince Lombardi claimed winning is not a sometimes thing. It is an all-time thing. Using a sporting example, your choice discussed the use of a win ethic. It's the opposite of a traditional amateur approach. Okay, we mentioned that. The win ethic can easily spill into win at all costs, where someone might dope or do things for financial rewards or for contracts or for sponsorship, and it's based on extrinsic rewards. There's some nice points in there that I'd like to draw out. Really nice. It's based on extrinsic rewards, not necessarily for the sort of the internal mechanisms. So we've got this, and the way we've answered here, we've sort of taken win ethic and we've merged it into the more negative win at all costs. Let's just take it to here. Compare how sportsmanship and gamesmanship may be utilised within the game of cricket. So we've been given our specific example of cricket. Quite tough, especially if we don't know the game well. So sportsmanship is playing by the rules and morals. So we've got rules and morals, but gamesmanship is exploiting the rules wherever possible. So can you just first of all make a point that first mark is a comparative statement, okay? So I've got sportsmanship is, but on the other hand, the other way around, gamesmanship is this other thing. Our statements must be comparative. Sportsmanship is clapping a batsman. Again, batsman is the accepted ECB term. I'm not being gender specific. Sportsmanship is clapping a batsman to the crease, and gamesmanship is sledging. Can you see again? That's a comparative statement. Sportsmanship is walking when you know you're out, but gamesmanship is keeping quiet. Again, I'm comparing. We've also got here, sportsmanship is not appealing too loudly, and gamesmanship is being very vociferous. Again, we are making that comparison, okay? So I am getting 4 times comparative statement in here. And if you get a compare question, you must make your statements comparative. Really nice language for you to use in comparative answers. Comma, space, whereas. And what I mean by that is you can say, so-and-so is this thing, comma, space, whereas the other thing is this thing. The other one is but. The other one is on the other hand. Say, the other thing is different. You can also use statements like similarly, comma, because of course if you're comparing, sometimes the comparison will have a similarity. So sportsmanship is like this, and so you can say sportsmanship is within the rules. Similarly, gamesmanship is stretching the rules but still within them. So you've got a similarity there, not necessarily a difference. Okay, I'm just going to take the briefest of pauses just to sip a drink, and I'll be straight back. Now, if you like, I can try and convince you that this is a super exciting topic of our course and it's so important for you to learn for your future. I'm sure it will be for some of you, but let's be honest, this is a topic we just need to understand, get to grips with, and be able to write accurately about. Okay, so the use of sports legislation. So first things first, folks, just on a practical level, you must be able to apply this to performers, officials, coaches, and spectators. Okay, so particularly what we're talking about here is the capacity to receive a question in your exam and notice it's relating to one of these groupings. So that on it by itself is a useful tip, right? You must be able to do that. Now, you could almost just go, right, I've got it now, James, I'll just learn these things and I'll write them down. To an extent, that is what we're talking about here. But I would like to make a couple of clarifications. So one of the key things about laws, we want those laws to protect performers from injuries. That's fairly obvious, but also to protect from deviance. So, for example, if you lose to someone who is later found out to be doping, that there is a legal ramification for that and the loss of earnings you might have experienced, for example. It can also protect against potential spectator behaviour. So if spectators get something wrong, and there have been examples of this week. I'm a Nottingham Forest fan, and as far as I understand it, as I sit and do this, Forest got through to the playoffs finals on Wednesday, and there was a pitch invasion, and someone clocked or threw over or something one of the opposition players. That needs to be protected against, doesn't it? So that's not right. If a player has a contract dispute, then of course the law will support that. If they have the contract dispute with sponsors, they might need compensation, especially if something is done against them. We also want the performers to experience equal opportunities and protection from discrimination, just like any other form of employment, and of course the law helps to protect that. Protect from sexual abuse, of course, this is now leading into what we call safeguarding. Think especially about like youth programs, sports clubs or academies. This kind of thing is a really important point here. Or racism as well, of course. Negligence of officials and coaches. So if an official or a coach gets something really wrong, if they have you playing on a surface which is covered in glass or something, then of course there's laws that should have protected you there, and it might be legal ramification. And of course that sometimes a performer might want to protect themselves from a media company which is effectively too pervasive. It's getting too involved. It's invasive into their life. Now the officials. So what we're talking about here with referees, umpires, line judges, table officials, they need to be protected from negligence. So conduct that falls below a reasonable personal standard and leads to a breach of the duty of, that should say care there, by the way, which results in foreseeable harm to another. So of course, first of all, officials have to protect others, but the law has to protect officials from negligence themselves. Officials, we want to think about this duty of care. It's a legal obligation imposed on someone if they're responsible for a group of people. So this is often a referee, or an official. So think about an official making sure that an environment, let's say a rugby pitch, is acceptable to play on. That referees will abandon games if that is not the case. Officials have a duty of care to eliminate dangers. Just mentioned that. Participants can contest in a safe environment. That's exactly what we're talking about. And referees can be found liable for injuries sustained by players. I mean, this is rare, but in a rare case, this might be relevant. So of course we need laws both to protect the officials, but protect others from poor officiating, I suppose. Now, coaches very much focus on the duty of care. We need a first aider. It's not just someone running on with a wet sponge to rub a dislocated shoulder or something. We must maintain the right supervision. Look at this one, ratio of participants to adults. Talking about youth sport here, aren't we? Balanced competition, we mean that this might be gender specific, this might be age specific, level specific, weight category specific in certain sports as well. We need to know medical information of our participants. We need to know contact details, especially if parents are involved. We need to risk assess and do risk assessments. We need to plan for any dangers and health and safety issues. We need to check the facility. It's all obvious. Adapt session to the needs and ability of the participants, especially if we're looking at things like Paralympic participation, disability sport. Coaches must be trained. They must have a DBS, which of course is a safeguarding clearance. What we mean here is that they've got a clear police record. They need to be educated on type of abuse, okay? And that's a really important one. As teachers, of course, we get a lot of training on these sort of things. Educating on the danger of drugs and supplements so you can guide people to avoid things if you think they're dangerous. Awareness of overtraining. Overtraining, of course, is a positive form of deviance, and we don't want that to happen. And we want coaches to show duty of care by having the correct training type and method to make sure that it's relevant to those individuals. And then finally, for our spectators, we want to talk about the Taylor report here. The Taylor report was a report that was published post-Hillsborough. Kind of just say justice for the 97 as well at this point. It's something that's it's an important thing and relatively personal to me. So I just want to say that, offer my full support to the families of that tragedy. Anyway, Taylor Report published all kinds of recommendations for football stadia to make it safer. Across the 70s and 80s, we had events like Hillsborough, the Heysel Stadium. We had the Bradford Football Stadium fire, which killed a lot of people. So what you probably considered now as a young person looking at sports stadium facility is very, very safe environments. There were real issues in the past. So spectators, of course, must act within the law. All-seater stadia really help with this. Control of alcohol sales, specified kick-off times can bring more safety, especially if it's like a grudge rivalry match. More security in CCTV. I do feel like these points here make the fan the problem, which I think is a little bit questionable. Intelligence gathering, police liaison, tough deterrents, bans, fines, imprisonment. So there's loads of laws here that sort of control the fan. Can I just state again, coming back to where some of this stemmed from, all the indicators suggest that this was not the fault of the fans. This was a fault of poor policing. I don't want to get into that. But let's just be careful not to go so far that we think, the fans are the problem. No, we have to provide fans a safe environment to be in and to be normal human beings who, make whatever decisions they're going to make. Now, we've got a number of acts here. I'm not going to go over all of these for you. Slip them into your answers where you can. You can see we've got a gradual progression of safety laws to make it safer and safer and safer. Just that kind of timeline of progression. If you include some of those into your answers, then more the better. Now, what have we got here? In 2003, a rugby player was seriously injured during a collapsed scrum. It was argued that the on-match referee had been negligent to define it, and it's when their conduct has fallen below a reasonable standard, which can lead to a breach in the duty of care and cause harm to people. So we've given 3 answers there for our 2. We've applied the principle of the bogey. If we're looking for 2 marks, make 3 points. But of course, we've got our definition nice and clean in there. Following on from that, discuss the use of sports legislation for officials. So broadly speaking, folks, we're taking this material here. Notice that the word official is specific. So if I answer here, or here, or here, I'm not going to get credit. I must be able to recognise that. So what have we got? Officials check the playing area, ensure it's safe. They stay up to date, that should say, with training on new laws and regulations. They need, officials often need protection, and sports legislation can protect them from a claim. And this risk can deter some from becoming officials. So because there are legal ramifications to being an official referee, some people just won't do it because it's too much responsibility and the threat is potentially too high. Now, I think we're probably doing half time there, Marta will tell me, but what we're certainly going to do is take a moment. And half time it is, Marta. Thank you. Yeah. What do you think? Any thoughts? Any questions?
Questions
Far
from
away.
Students.
Mm-hmm.
One student saying, on the sporting example question for win ethic, you did not add an example. Will we get penalised if we do not make reference to a sport?
The example would have been 0.1 on the mark scheme. I'm just remembering, I think my was it doping or violence I gave was the example. So there was an example in there, I think. Just check that, but I'm fairly sure I gave the example of the use of doping, so that would be the AO2 point would be the 0.1. So that would have been, so it did include an example. I probably could have done the example better, saying doping in the form of anabolic steroids or something like that, but the example was there.
Specify a sport, for example?
In that particular case, because it's the nature of it was the example there is giving an example ultimately of deviance. Okay. And the example there of deviance was illegal doping basically. So that in that case that would be reasonable. You're always welcome to develop an example, of course you are. So you could say doping, such as Dwayne Chambers taking THG in 100-metre sprinting, or you could say Lance Armstrong using EPO during the 2000s in road cycling or whatever. That would, 1990s and 2000s, that would be absolutely reasonable. But the example in that particular answer is doping as the form, effectively as the form of deviance. Mm-hmm. I think, or did I say violence? I think it was doping. I seem to remember it's doping. Mm-hmm. But yeah.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
And the second question is, with AQA there are 35
That's right.
marks for each section.
There's three lots of 35, yeah.
Can you explain what the questions make, or what are the questions that make up the whole 35 marks?
Yeah.
150 marker.
That's absolutely right to the person that's raised that point. So in each of the papers there's essentially 3 sections of 35 marks. That's exactly right. And the way that works in each of those 35, the section of 35 is there's a 15 marker and an 8 marker, some of which are synoptic or can be synoptic, and then there are a range of questions between 1, 2, 3 and 4 mark questions that make up the remaining 12 marks. I'll actually show you that if that's okay. Just bear with me a second. If I just show you this, hopefully you'll see this. You can see this on the screen, I think. I'll actually just go into paper 2. This is our infographic, which is available on the hub page. If I just, as it were, zoom into the mark allocation here, if you have a look at paper 2 mark allocation, you'll see that 15 markers make up 45 marks. That's 3 lots of 15 markers. 8 markers make up 24 marks. That's 3 lots of 8. And then the remaining mark comes from 1 to 4 markers. So in essence, what we're getting there is we're getting the remaining 12 marks made up of 1, 2, 3, and 4 markers. Now, we don't know what the split of that is. And if I show you a document we use regularly, if I show you Summer 2018 here, here's Summer 2018 for one particular section. Look, and you'll see here that we've got our 8 marker and our 15 marker there, and everything else was a 3, a 1, a 2, a 4, a 1, and a 1. So you're going to get some balance and combination of those questions. In fact, I just wonder if I can go here for you. So if you look here on the, so this would be one section there. This would be another section here. This would be another section here. So in this case, for the first section, we've got 1 mark, 4, 2, 1, 3, then the 8 and the 15. This one here, we've got 1, 1, 3, 3, 2, 2, then the 8 and the 15. And then the third section, which of course is the sports science and technology, is there's 1, 1, 3, 3, 4, then the 8 and the 15. And that is the same regardless of which paper you look at. This one happens to be 2021. Here you've got a slightly different blend. You're getting lots of 1 or 2 markers in the first section, and it works that way. So we know that for each block of 35 marks, you're going to get an 8 and a 15, and that there will, as far as we know, let me just come back on the screen. As far as we know, there will never be anything greater than a 4-mark question outside of that. There's never been a 5 or a 6 or a 7 marker. It will be a combination of 1, 2, 3s, and 4s, and the split of those 1, 2, 3s, and 4s can vary slightly from year to year, from section to section. But that is definitely what you're going to be doing.
Mm-hmm. Brilliant.
Any other questions?
Thank you. No more questions. Just a bit of a personal comment. You seem to be, from what you said in the session so far, you seem to be a little bit anti-Olympics. Mm-hmm. Why is that? I
wouldn't say anti-Olympics. I mean, I adore watching the Olympics. I think it's a very, very impressive, often very passionate sporting exemplification. Some of the most exciting things I've ever witnessed were Olympics in London 2012 and Paralympics we went to together, for example, Martha. I absolutely loved it. My issue with the Olympics is that if you take the top echelon of athletes out of it, so with respect to Mo Farah, with respect to those kind of athletes who do very, very well in their careers out of being in part of the Olympics, Ennis Hill, these kind. If you look at everyone else, they're effectively sacrificing huge portions of their life to go and compete for this, and they're doing that in essence for no money, right? Although they're probably on the world-class program, they're probably doing that for a fairly simple existence. Think about our archers, think about our shooters, think about our non-sort of top elite famous sort of athletes. Now that would be absolutely fine if those Olympic Games were not being promoted for huge profits by massive corporations. Now that's my problem, is that effectively the value in these games of these people and the commitment they have to this patriotism and this winning medals, and then we sort of put this gold lacquer around just 1 or 2 individuals, who deserve it, by the way, but then everyone else has a fairly humdrum existence. Meanwhile, massive corporations are making huge amounts of dollars, huge amounts of money through media and sponsor related as partners of the Olympics, when really I would argue that people who are sacrificing themselves to go and do those roles, the athletes, should be the people that would be benefiting from it. So whilst I don't want everything to go towards a commercialised structure, and I don't want it all to be like professional football, I do feel there's a real issue with the fact that we use kind of patriotism as almost like a sticker or a badge to say, no, you will come and entertain us, and meanwhile McDonald's going to take the profits. I don't feel good about that. Mm-hmm. Sorry, that's a slight political thing. It ain't going to get you any marks on your paper. It's just how I feel. It's just my opinion. But everyone will have their own, and people will probably differ. Please don't take from that I don't like the Olympics. I've watched probably more than anyone ever. So, but I really feel like it's a model which exploits athletes, apart from the ones at the very top, and of course they're the ones used to justify the situation, aren't they? So that's my take on it. It's just an opinion. Please don't shoot me. It's just an opinion. Brilliant. Okay, I did want to show one thing before we switch back. I just wanted the students out there to know where the language that goes onto the screen comes from. So I just show. It's the wrong thing. I did just show this document a moment ago. This here. Can I just show it again? What we do at our end, folks, is oops, that was the wrong one. We analyse your past paper questions very, very accurately. So, for example, we know that in 2018, this was the run of questions that were on the paper. We know this was the mark allocation. We know that these were the skills. We know this was the A1, 2, and 3 distribution. But more importantly, we also know that this, and this was the accepted language from those particular questions. So, for example, if I just choose something at random, I'll try and choose, let's do ethics. We know that this is every question that they've ever asked before, and we know that this is the key accepted language. And off the back of that, what we can develop at our end is we develop these documents, which are the key language of every single topic on the course. So if I go all the way down to ethics, hopefully, you'll actually recognise some of this stuff. So here you can even see the images that Marta and I have made together. Here's the exact language of amateurism accepted by AQA. Here's the exact language of the Olympic oath. You just saw me write all this stuff onto the screen, and you probably wrote it down as well. And the point I'm trying to make here is that we know that this stuff is accepted by AQA as possible correct answers in these areas. So I just wanted to highlight that for you, because we're going to go on to commercialisation in a second. Just bear with me a second. Our commercialisation stuff is here. Look. Or we're going to do a bit of what we're doing. If I just go down a bit here, we're going to do stuff on. Sorry, I'm not doing this very well. We're going to do stuff on positive and negative impact of commercialisation on the official. Here's the exact language that will be accepted by AQA, and you'll see that play out in our session. So I just wanted you people to be aware of that, like the level of accuracy that we're trying to put into that language. So really, the appeal I'm making to you, although I didn't present that very well, the appeal I'm making to you is if you use that language in context. Now you have to give it the context and recognise that the question is asking for that. But if you're able to do that from the student perspective, the language that you have in front of you is very, 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 very reliable. And that's the point I just wanted to get across. So I hope that's useful. They're boring documents. We spend tens and tens of days a year developing them and improving them and refining them. But once then we come to deliver, the delivery should be accurate. That's the key, right? Okay, Marty, you happy for me to move on?
Yep. Okay,
we're doing commercialisation, sponsorship and the media. Here we go. So one of our jobs in sports, society and tech courses, we need to look at an evaluation of commercialisation, sponsorship and the media. And can I please stress that that's what we are going to do here. We are going to evaluate. We're going to look at the positive and negative impacts, and we'll start on the performer. We'll look on the media and other categories in due course. So if the sport becomes further commercialised using the involvement of sponsorship and the media to promote sports, to distribute sports to the public, to the consumer, to the fan, what are the positive impacts of this? Well, we get more wages for the actual performer. That's what we're answering about here. We also get the increased availability of professional contracts. This means more athletes become full-time. There we go. We get an increased training regime. So we can call this kind of professionalization, I suppose, a nice way to put it. So that the performer is just going to get better because they've got better access to this kind of thing. Increasingly in the public eye, which of course can lead to possibility of making money. Maintain discipline and behave appropriately. So it's really important here that the performer does this, because of course anything else is going to be displayed. But if they show fair play, they're going to become a role model for that kind of behaviour, and that's going to effectively make them, like I suppose you say, a household name. Their off-field charity work is enhanced. I mean, I really would, although it wasn't charity specific, I would really rate Marcus Rashford as an excellent example around free school meals for that one. I think that's a really nice example. And they get access to high quality training, support and equipment. As a result, they get to be better performers. They get better, improves their chances of winning. So that's good, right? Now, there are negatives for the performer. They're under more pressure because we've got this focus on winning. Win at all cost mentality could, in the worst case, develop, and they are willing to do anything to create that win, that next performance, including deviant behaviour like cheating, doping, violence. That's obviously not what we want to see. I've mentioned deviance already. Sponsors can become demanding, especially of the time from the participant, which of course can get in the way. They're treated as commodities, these athletes, so they're there to sell rather than to perform and entertain. And minority sport performers miss out. So if you are an elite level footballer and male, you're going to benefit from this a great deal probably. But on the downside, if you are taking part in, let's say, archery, which of course is an Olympic sport and Britain has a good heritage of, then of course you're going to struggle to get these same benefits. Okay, so it is kind of, what we'd say is these benefits are relatively exclusive. Okay, they're relative exclusives. They only operate for those sports that are really popular in the public eye. Now, we also have the impact of these things on the coach themselves. So the coach becomes higher profile. They got more public role awareness. They get more funding back into the sport. They can invest money into the squad support system. So a coach can basically, want of a better phrase, buy better performers, bring better performers into the squad, whatever that happens to be. They can analyse their opponents more because we've got this increased commerciality. We've got more staff for analytics, for scouting, and of course we can benefit that way. And we can learn from other high-profile coaches because they're in the public eye. Now, there are negatives, of course. We get intense pressure from a coach, and we'll talk as well that we've mentioned before that if they don't perform, they get the sack, right? If they don't win, they must win games. Otherwise, they get the sack. High level of public expectation. They can be fired relatively quickly. It seems bizarre at times, doesn't it? Expectations for interviews, answer media questions. And this is often immediately, can't write today, immediately after a performance. And if you're suffering the sort of the hurt of a loss and then you have to go and shove your face in front of a camera, it might be tricky. Inequalities of a coach of a minority sport. So again, come back to my archery. If you're an archery coach, you're not getting these benefits, but of course you've got the financial disadvantage of this. I'm actually not totally sure what we mean by that. I'm going to think about that one and maybe answer that. I wasn't expecting to make that point. What do I mean by that financial disadvantage? Are we talking about our minority sports? Let me think about that one. Okay, I need to change the canvas. I'll be straight back. So what about the impact of all this commercialisation, sponsorship and media stuff on referees, on officials, on umpires? That's where we're going with this next. And I hope you realise that we put this imagery in place because it's really going to form a really solid foundation for, potentially an 8 or a 15 marker or any kind of evaluative structure, or even if you just asked for the positives or asked for the negatives. So what's good of it about this for the referee, the umpire? Profile and fame, I'm not sure they want that, but anyway, increased awareness of the need for officials, so they actually become more relevant, we can say, because it's seen as more relevant through the media. Increased salary, everyone loves that. They can become full-time. I think that's a real positive in sport. More money to support official technology. Okay, so technology develops because the commercialisation brings money in and we can develop that technology. Officials then make better, more accurate decisions. Who doesn't like that? Greater support networks for officials. So networks can actually officials can effectively network, even sport to sport. Okay, so it's not necessarily just a network of rugby officials or hockey or whatever, or athletics. It could be for absolutely that networking between them. Better training means increased standard, access to high quality training, support and equipment. Obviously very, very positive, but there are negatives for the official. Let's look at that. The first one is there's a pressure on the right decision because there's more money on each individual outcome of a sport, and therefore, of course, there's more pressure. They get a lot of criticism if they make a mistake. That can lead to abuse. They can even lose their job. Okay, so this is like something that can be really negative if it's like a particularly important game, according to some people. Their reputation become damaged if they get the wrong decision. They become known for certain things. They can become dependent on technology, which of course has probably been financed by commercialisation and actually probably been provided by the media companies. So that over-dependency is bad because then there's a reluctance to make decisions. They might lose confidence because their decisions are going to get checked. Okay, so the overuse of technology via the commercialisation is going to be a problem for them. They might be asked to make responses to the media. Their private lives may not remain private. And of course, if we're not at the very, very top level, the tech, which is often funded by the media company, is not always available. So it's actually, again, that word exclusive comes into our kind of lexicon for this particular consideration. I just mean our vocabulary, sorry. And what about the impact of commercialisation, sponsorship in the media for the audience? And I guess with the audience, we're talking about spectators in grounds and stadia, but we're also about people at home. Okay, so performances are better, good. It's more exciting. The facilities are better. We get a better viewing experience, whether we're watching through the TV, an app. We get interactive timelines. If we're in the stadium, we can see the screen and we can watch the replays. You get more merchandise because there's more money involved. It's more commercial. You kind of have a higher loyalty to the team. You might have more opportunities to watch that sort of never-ending cycle of, let's say, football. By the way, talking of never-ending cycles. More competitions and events. New formats are exciting because they've been restructured, and we like watching T20 cricket, say. Rule changes would make it fun. Where you might have improved technology for viewing at home. I mentioned interactive timelines. High definition interactive, Not sure what we mean by referee links. I think we might mean they're like microphones so we can hear what's going on. Awaiting decisions makes increased excitement. Was the ball in or out? What's VAR going to say? Increased awareness and knowledge of sport. We actually learn more because we've got more exposure, and we get more role models to kind of follow, emulate and idolize. Let's finish this off with the negatives on the audience. It's blinking expensive. Pay-per-view has come into play and only some people can afford it. Loss of tradition. We've got loads of breaks so adverts can be made. It drives me crazy. Fewer tickets available because more tickets go to hospitality and sponsors, so it's harder to get a match day ticket. Change in start times. Major sports dominate, so again the model is exclusive. Come back to my archery example. It ain't working there, is it? Minor sports receive less and less and less coverage because the others are dominant. We also get links to team or player merchandise sometimes viewed negatively due to high costs. So merchandise is really expensive, folks. And I've got you've seen this sort of notion that young people want to wear this season's kit, and you've got to fork out 140 quid or whatever it is to buy one. It's kind of crazy. It costs a lot of money, and the merchandise, as I said, changes. Now, finally, to wrap this up, I think we're going to look at the impact of commercialisation, sponsorship and media on the sport. And thank you for sticking with me, folks. I know this is a sort of a fairly... it's very limited on its excitement factor. I do recognise that, but nevertheless, I do feel it prepares you guys well. So, on the sport... Revenue up, sport is global, more sponsors, more investment, higher wages to players, best players come to your league, your competition, which of course is then cyclical. You get better standards of facilities for the spectators, better coaching, rehabilitation, better biomechanics, better medical support, better physio. The referees become full-time, better decisions, benefits passed on to grassroots, and more people participate in the sport because they see it. More people take it up. We've got more fans. It becomes more popular. They invest in the sport. Sport run in a professional manner, like a very streamlined business, and variations or formats of sport become broader, so that it's more exciting for let's say, the TV audience. But there are negatives. Uneven distribution amongst clubs and leagues. The big clubs get bigger, the small clubs are really marginalised. National governing bodies lose control of their sport, and the media company and the commercialised structure becomes dominant. Global appeal, it means more scrutiny. You get lots and lots of criticism when things aren't good. Decision making is, you sort of lose control over that, and it sort of gets taken to hands of wealthy individuals or media moguls, this sort of thing. We've got competitions dictated by TV companies. We've got more gamesmanship. We've got more win at all costs. I'm not going to say win at all costs Lombardi, because just remember with Lombardi, we're talking about the win ethic rather than the win at all costs. He was not a cheat. Reduced appeal of the sport. So the sport actually might decline in its appeal, often because it's oversaturated. There's too much of it about. The traditional nature is lost. Inequalities of sport coverage. Think our archery again. High-level performers in sport are affected due to expectation of the sponsor. Okay, so this expectation of performers, and we get over-sensationalism. And of course, this is to provide what you might loosely call clickbait, or to sell headlines. Now, let's finish this off. We've got a question here. Over 50% of Premier League football matches are no longer played on Saturday at 3 p.m. Explain how global media coverage has changed the nature of sport, so specific to the sport here. Use examples to support. Many sports have changed format, T20 cricket. Rule changes have made sports less technical, such as removal of offside in hockey. Start times are fixed by the media for maximum viewing audience. International club sport is also prioritised over national club sport, so national teams become less relevant because they're not as commercialised. And then you've got here, finally, audience have become global, meaning sports starts to become global icons. So we're looking at examples, effectively, of how media has influenced and affected different sports. Okay, so that's our example there. Let's go further. We're very nearly there. We're here on an 8 marker this time. The average number of tweets per day for the Euros 2020 was over 500 million. By the way, just remember that Euro 2020 was actually done in 2021 because of the pandemic. Evaluate strengths and weaknesses, the impact of social media on football. The internet is a combination of apps, social media, websites. AO1, I'm saying what it is. Examples are Facebook and Instagram. AO1, I'm just giving examples. Others are video platforms like YouTube. You can say Twitch. You can say Vimeo if you want. The internet can be a source of live streaming. So we've got sort of the notion of that. On Apple, I think that's meant to say on apps rather than Apple, such as DAZN, and this can massively increase the range of access that spectators have to sport around the world. The internet has also The internet also allows stakeholders such as the FA or Premier League to promote their news and events, and sports clubs can promote themselves all over the world without relying on mainstream media. Individual players can build social networks. An excellent example is Rashford's Twitter and Instagram campaigns to support disadvantaged children. But there are issues. For example, players and performers can receive hate. Traditional organisations like the FA can be slow to realise the centrality of the internet. They don't develop their brand well enough. Once they've achieved this, they can run campaigns this way, so they can run anti-discrimination campaigns through their online media, which can grow rapidly, so it's not the traditional sort of slow build. And finally, the internet has allowed players and clubs to provide their own side of the story. That's a really nice point for us to include in our answers, rather than hoping they will be portrayed in a positive light. These messages are globalised and do indeed become the dominant narrative. So it's actually an interesting one. What we're actually seeing here, we're saying that sport has been commercialised and there's very media involvement. One of the points we're making in this answer is that the media and the sports club or performer, they're actually almost the same thing because of the impact of social media as a part of the media, okay? So that's actually an interesting point, isn't it? So usually sports clubs, sports themselves, they're reliant on media companies like BBC or BT Sport or Sky Sports or whatever to promote them. But what we're saying here is that clubs can effectively promote themselves because they've got direct followings through social media. And I think that's an interesting point for us to maybe dwell on, summarise and to finish on. Okay, I hope that's been useful. Back on the camera. And there we go. Oof, that feels good.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah.
Marta, any questions for these fine people,
No.
from these fine people?
No questions, but there is one lovely message from a student at Bishop Leffer.
Chichester.
Amazing message to say thank you for what you do, the resources you provide, and they've been using the students. They've been using the revision sessions as well as the EverLearner, and the student is very happy and very confident that hopefully that they're going to do well in their exams.
Yeah,
so,
well,
lovely message.
In all seriousness, I honestly think if you use the resources and effectively you learn the things that we've put into those notes, that you've put into those notes, you'll have an extremely good chance. I don't think there's any question about that. I'd also like to just say in response to that, we know Bishop Leffer School down in Chichester really well. By the way, if you don't know where Chichester is on the south coast, it's got some lovely beaches nearby the city itself, Chichester. Two things about it: it's a beautiful place, often very sunny, lovely walled city that you can walk around. It's also a really good answer on Pointless, I find. Chichester, when they ask about British cities, it's a good one. There and Ely in Cambridgeshire. Anyway, but we know Bishop Leffer really, really well. I've actually presented down to the whole SLT. You were there, but actually, Marta, we went together. I know Mr. Brown very, very well. He's a friend of mine, and it's a lovely piece of feedback. So thank you very much for writing. I really appreciate that. Thank you. Anything further, Marta, or anything you wanted to clarify from your perspective?
Nothing else. Just I wanted to ask you, James, if you fancy running a marathon in San Sebastian in Spain in November.
Wow. San Sebastian, again, I can highly recommend it. It's a bit like Chichester, except it's on the north coast of Spain, of the Basque Country, rather than the south coast of England. Donosti, of course, in the local language of Basque. And it's a place we love very much. What's the beach called? It's got an arc-shaped beach. La Concha, exactly, La Concha. So yeah, I'd love to. A full marathon doesn't feel that close to me at the moment.
It's November. You might have time.
Yeah, November. I could work.
November,
Well, I've got a record marathon time I could look to beat at some point, 3:38. So we'll have to see if we can beat that. I don't think I will be getting very close to that as things stand at the moment, but we'll give it a go. Why not?
Half marathon and 10k. Otherwise.
Is it flat?
I'm not sure if there's fun run.
Is it flat? Is it hilly round off the coast there?
I don't know.
Marathons and mountains ain't a good combo.
I wouldn't think it's, but there are a couple of hills, and there's probably a combination.
Can't wait. I'll say it's a definite maybe.
Yeah.
It's an absolute definite maybe. Okay. Well, folks, it leaves us the opportunity to say whatever that appropriate phrase is of good luck, go for it, smash it, all that stuff. Never know exactly what to say. It isn't a matter of luck at the end of the day. It's a matter of preparation. You folks are doing that preparation. So I don't think you need to be lucky. I guess my advice around the paper is to control arousal and to allow yourself the right sort of attentional field, sports psychology, to really interpret and perceive those questions, selective attention, appropriately when you get in there. So get that appropriate arousal. Remember that if you're feeling that kind of somatic arousal, it's quite good for you. If you're worrying and panicking, that cognitive sort of anxiety arousal, that's quite negative. So if you can try and control that and allow yourself that activation and preparedness and readiness, as well as actually preparing your knowledge and skills. I'd just like to once again recommend the infographics are really insightful, so do use those. And obviously, just want to repeat what I said before about the accuracy of the language and the notes that we've used. Without meaning to be a boring old git, if you learn the material and those images that we've put onto the screens here, and then you apply it appropriately in your exam questions, you've got a very, very good chance of hitting a really significant portion of the mark schemes. So I'd really endorse you doing that. I'm very confident that if you do that, it's going to be a worthwhile experience. And I guess finally, I don't want to dwell on this as any kind of negative, but you folks who, had a tough time in 2020 with the pandemic when that hit in March and you missed your exams. I know some of you would have been just to a degree happy about that, but this is a real opportunity for you to go and express what you've learned. And young people deserve the right to challenge, and they deserve the right to go and exemplify that which they're capable of doing. So whilst I know exams are stressful, trust me, I've been around them my whole career and also as a young person. But can I just stress as well, this is a great opportunity for you to go and express that which you've learned, that which you've achieved. So try and see it at least partially in that frame if you can. And I wish you absolute very best with whatever the next step is, whether that's university, apprenticeship, work, other opportunity. I really, really wish you the best, and we're grateful for your time and cooperation and participation in these sessions. So thank you very much. It means more to me than you probably realise, so thank you. Okay,
Brilliant.
There we go. Happy, Marta?
Very happy.
Let's give these guys a song one last time.
Yeah.
Cheers, folks. Have a good one.
Bye.